Welcome to the Church Resource, where we talk about the best resources for pastors, leaders, and lay people. I'm your host, Jeff Oliver, looking today at a book that you might think, well, why are we looking? That book is so old. I know that this book keeps coming up as I read just articles and what's going on in the world today and in Christian life, and especially in this realm of dating and marriage. And so this book just comes up often enough that I think it's worth looking at again. If you are not familiar with the book, it is I Kissed Dating Goodbye, A New Attitude Toward Romance and Relationships. It was new in 1997 when Joshua Harris wrote it. Then this is a repackaged, kind of a new edition of that book. More on that later. But he wrote this book at just the age of 19. He was in a very good church, I think discipled well, and he had this idea about the fact that Christian couples, Christian singles don't need to think about dating anymore. They need to think about being in a relationship that is more of a courtship setting, being more in a group of people and hanging out as groups of people together, that parents should know each other, have a long-established relationship within their church together, and they should, in some way, use that as a pool for choosing a spouse. It got very close to looking like arranged marriage without really saying that, but that these parents would know these parents and know their background and know how solid they are in the faith, and that they're very faithful people, and that your daughter should meet my son, and we can work on it that way. So again, sounds like arranged marriage to me, but I think that the content of the information is good. I think that for the most part, let's not take it too far, but mostly I think that it's a good way to think about dating, because there are a lot of, as Harris points out in this book, there are a lot of challenges, pitfalls that come with dating, and for a young man and a young woman to be spending that much time alone for long periods of time, it's just not a good idea, and that we ought to try to keep our way pure, as the Scripture tells us. So I think, again, the core, the ideas behind the book are good, and I will explain a little more as far as what the evolution of Joshua Harris's thoughts on that as well. So I want to tell you some of the contents on this book as we look through it. That there, part one is just, isn't there a better way? He's setting the stage there, providing the case for why we need something different than traditional dating, and he talks about this being very countercultural. There's a chapter that's called The 7 Habits of Highly Defective Dating. So he's not a fan of dating at all. But then to get to part two that he calls the heart of the matter, that we learn what love is. We learn the definition of love, that it's selfless giving, it's thinking of the other person first before you put yourself and your needs up next. So it is talking about also that if you have a past that is already cluttered, let's say, that already has stains there, that Jesus can take those and clean up that past as well, so that it can be, as Harris would put it, that you can become, at least spiritually, mentally, emotionally, you can become a virgin again, even if that can't happen physically. And so he talks about building a new lifestyle. That's part 3 of the book, and part 4 is looking ahead. So how do we think about this new type of relationship in terms of looking forward to marriage, but also that he does have, and I appreciate this because Christian singleness is not talked about enough. It's not recognized often in the ways that even churches function and operate. So he talks about being the right person, making the most of your singleness before you look forward then into a dating type of relationship, or even especially into marriage. So that's the kind of the core of Joshua Harris's work here on that. And as I mentioned, this is the book from 1997. Joshua Harris then comes when he was single, by the way. And then by 2003, Joshua Harris wrote the book Boy Meets Girl, which is called Say Hello to Courtship. Kiss Dating Goodbye, Say Hello to Courtship. So obviously a play on words there, but he writes this book after he's married and says, well, wait a minute. I think that maybe everything that I said in I Kissed Dating Goodbye was not totally accurate, or maybe it's just that it wasn't understood properly. So here's what we should do now. As you have a man meeting a woman, a boy meeting a girl, is the words that he uses on the cover of this book, that maybe we need to think about it a little differently. And so what is courtship? Is that more holy than dating? Is it something that we need to reconsider? And maybe in a relationship, what's the best thing that you can do, with your time together? And he says, no, it's not kissing. It's not, petting. It's going to be that we would spend time communicating, and that we would have that time to deepen our relationship. Also, how can Christians committed to waiting view their sex drive as a good thing? So he's answering these questions in that book. He gives the chapters things like why dating versus courtship is not the point. In other words, kind of an answer back to his 1997 book in this book. And then romance and wisdom, how God guides us, and what he does to set up a meeting, set up the relationship between you and the right person in the right place at the right time. He talks about this season of courtship, what that might look like, and what we can do as a healthier option to dating. So he's not totally renounced this other book, I Kiss Dating Goodbye, but he is providing a kind of maybe a clarification on that book. And so he also talks again about how past sexual sin can be cleaned up, how it can be redeemed, how God will use that time, and then how to consider your relationship then with someone new, and how that might be I was going to say fleshed out. That's a poor choice of words here. So how it can be used for the glory of God. So he says in this book, the beginning of this book, Boy Meets Girl, he says, now the main point of I Kiss Dating Goodbye was, if you're not ready for marriage, wait on romance. But he says now fellow singles are asking, how can you know when you are ready for marriage? And once you're ready, what should you do? So what should you do is what he attempts to answer in Boy Meets Girl. Now, as I said and have said several times now, that we are looking at a book that was written and then kind of a response to that book, I would say even a sequel, and then another edition of that first book that he addresses the concept of Boy Meets Girl and what he says in that book, and then what he has said in I Kiss Dating Goodbye, and gives another couple of chapters in that to explain, maybe to help the reader to understand what he's saying in this book. So he talks about that, even gives a preview. The first chapter of Boy Meets Girl is in the epilogue of I Kiss Dating Goodbye. Again, I think especially as the dad of two who are singles and so out of the household, but one who is very much in this vein of thinking about courtship and dating and what all this means, and a 15-year-old, and so I'm thinking about these things a lot anyway. But I know that the information here is that Joshua Harris has presented is good, and so that's my recommendation for these books, is that you read them, but read them carefully. Now, as we look at the author of these books, that Joshua Harris, he was very young when he wrote this first book, and he was supported by a lot of people, by people within his church who were giving him a lot of aid and encouragement to do this kind of book, and also people just within the Christian community. But as one of my seminary professors said, that if there's a book that comes on the scene and everybody's talking about it, everybody has to have it, everybody's putting it in your hands and saying, you have to read this book, he says, that's where I'm going to have a lot of caution and probably wait about 10 years before I read it to see if people are still ever talking about it again, to see if it is still a good book and it still has some merit. That's what I think is the caution here with Joshua Harris, because maybe you've heard about him recently, and if you have not, I'll tell you this is the update from Joshua Harris, is that he has been one to very common, I think, very unexpected, unsurprising from this generation, is that he has deconstructed his faith. He's looked at what he believed before, and said, well, maybe that's not totally accurate, or maybe it's not pragmatic, and we need to think about our faith this way. And so he's repackaged his own faith. I don't know to say whether he's fallen away from the faith. Some would say adamantly, yes, he has. But I'll leave that for, that's really between him and God. But this is the person who wrote these books is now really outside of the faith. He probably would not say he is, but outside of Orthodox kind of evangelical faith is where he is now. So if that bothers you, if it's something that maybe you would just borrow this book from somebody, read it, and then give it back so that you don't have to own this book. But I think it's good. Again, the content in both of the books is helpful. But just know who is writing it, where he is today, where he stands on the faith, and so that needs to be taken with kind of some caution as you look into that. So I hope that's helpful. I know that the book, again, especially I Kiss Dating Goodbye, keeps coming up as people talk about these topics and the importance of just someone approaching dating, looking ahead to marriage, and what that could look like for somebody who is single and in that season of life. So that is I Kiss Dating Goodbye and Boy Meets Girl. I'll hold that one up if you're watching. And so those two books, I would recommend that you look at that, and as as the saying goes, that you would maybe eat the whole fish and spit out the bones. Keep what's good there. Keep what's helpful, what resonates, what is hopefully what is founded in Scripture, and what you feel that God would have you to learn from those books, but read carefully as always. So it's just two of the books on my shelf that have been helpful to me in my ministry and just in my working through these issues personally. So thank you for watching and listening to the Church Resource. If you would have any recommendations of books that you would like us to cover, please send an email to thechurchresource@gmail.com. That's thechurchresource@gmail.com.